see it. Okay, so we are recording. All right, can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yep.
Awesome. So we'll get started. Again, thanks everyone for coming. This is the second of 2 traffic calming meetings for Caldwell Lane. It's December 14th. We're meeting virtually at 5:30 p.m. My name is David Greaves. I'm working with NDOT as the engineer on this project, and I'll be talking through sort of what we're doing, why, and then some of the logistics on how it'll get voted on and implemented. Also on the phone is Darren Pack with NDOT and Abigail McCown with Kimley Horn. They're both going to help with the meeting as well. So we'll get started with some kind of a recap of meeting 1. We're not going to spend as much time on all of the general details, but we'll sort of give a refresher for anyone who wasn't able to make it to that meeting. Traffic calming is a residential street program. So essentially, NDOT will choose a number of neighborhood residential streets with the goals of slowing down speeds to basically apply physical solutions that are intended to make the neighborhood safer for those who live there. There are 3 E's of traffic calming. That's education, enforcement, and engineering. Education is kind of what we're doing here, basically advising neighbors of what traffic calming is, sort of raising awareness that traffic is a dangerous force on our roadways. Enforcement is pretty much up to Metro Police Department. That's not something that NDOT has a whole lot of control over. So bold and underlined here is engineering. That's really what NDOT prefers to focus on with the traffic calming program, really because it is sort of what our department is able to implement and make decisions on. Like the council member alluded to, this is part of NDOT's Vision Zero program. That is essentially believing in the goal that we can achieve 0 fatalities and serious injuries on Nashville's roadway. The reason we focus so much on slowing vehicles down is because when pedestrians or other vulnerable users are struck by a vehicle, how fast they were going really matters to the outcome of that accident. So if a car were going 25 miles an hour, the odds that they would survive are pretty good, 89%. As those speeds increase up to 35 and even 45 miles an hour, we can see that those chances of survival do go way down. So it is something that we believe is a very important goal to strive for those reasons, that it it really is a matter of life and death. This is a really popular program. So as of August of 2023, there were over 500 neighborhood streets who have applied. In this February of 2023, that's the selection that Caldwell was a part of. Only 25 streets were selected. So at the time we did that evaluation, that was earlier this year, Caldwell Lane was in the top 25 scorers on our pie chart of risk factors. We do like to plug Hub Nashville. They're basically a great resource for all things not traffic calming. In the first meeting, we had a lot of feedback about the stop sign at General Bait and some vegetation that was around there. I actually submitted a hub request to NDOT for a replacement of the sign and trimming some of those tree limbs. They said that they had done it like later that day. I haven't been out there to check, but I guess while we're on the subject, does anyone know, did tree like limbs and such get trimmed around that intersection to improve the visibility there?
I haven't had any problems seeing the stop sign, so they must have done something.
Okay, great. Yeah, this would have been like earlier this week. I was just, curious if anyone had seen them working out there. They usually do it during the day though, so it's kind of hard to keep an eye on everyone. So anyway, that's Hub. That's sort of the recap of like the full traffic calming program. Before we start zeroing in onto Caldwell, does anyone have questions about what we've covered so far? Sounds like no. So this map that we're looking at, this is the stretch of Caldwell Lane that was applied for in the traffic calming program and selected. What we're looking at is a screenshot of Nashville's traffic calming tracker that's on the traffic calming website. I'll show you a link and a QR code to it at the end of this slideshow, but basically it's a way to view the status of projects, who's applied, who's been selected, where projects have been built. Purple is all the streets that have applied, so you can see there are quite a few in the immediate surroundings that are also requesting traffic calming and may be selected in a later round. So we had a first meeting and talked about kind of the full suite of things available. What I'll review now is what we zeroed in on as probably a good fit for Caldwell. As a lot of you know, that's speed cushions. That's kind of NDOT's default choice for what to do on a given street when essentially they're experiencing speeding. These are a good and effective tool because essentially they're agnostic to driver behavior. If you were to like lower the speed limit or just put out a sign that says don't speed or watch out for pedestrians, that will have an effect on some people. But if you were inclined to ignore those, there's really not much else to do. Speed cushions, on the other hand, are pretty effective at slowing anyone down, or causing discomfort if you were to choose to go over them faster. They're only about 3 inches tall. That can sometimes be a surprise to folks. Um, the width, that's 6 feet. Basically, those are intended to be wide enough that most cars will have to interact with them in some way as they go over them. But if you're an emergency vehicle, perhaps you've got kind of a wider wheelbase that allows you to hit it straight on and not be affected as much. So they're a tool that the Nashville Department of Emergency Services really likes, NDOT really likes them, and it's a nice kind of agreement that they're a good measure for our street. I saw somebody ask what data is available that shows they're effective. There's two answers to that. The first is this one. This is a study that NDOT conducted in March of 2023, and basically they chose a few streets as just sort of case studies to test, what did vertical measures do. So we can see an average speed reduction of 9 miles an hour. That's pretty good. It's about what the national average is. There's data out there that came from all over the country. Like a lot of different cities have traffic calming programs, and most of them started quite a bit before Nashville's did. So in the general sense, we have that data to reference, but then we also have kind of the Nashville smaller study, but one that's more specific to our city. For anyone who's curious, the 85th percentile speed, that's another kind of statistical data point when it comes to traffic. Essentially, all it means is 15% of the people measured were going faster than whatever speed that is. So as we can see, that number decreased by 12 miles an hour, and that's also good news. Shows that these cushions are generally having the effect that they're intended to have. The next section of the meeting is going to basically be drilling into the plans that we've designed. So before we do that, I just want to open the floor up to questions again. If anyone has anything they'd like to discuss, ask about, just anything we've covered so far, happy to pause and take discussion. It sounds like we might be able to just kind of keep moving right along. So what we're looking at here is sort of the overall view of what our design is proposing. So you can see we have 11 sets of speed cushions. They're spaced in kind of a funky way. Basically, we have certain design constraints on where cushions can go. The big one is grade. So where you have this gap around the general bait always stop, we have pretty steep hills immediately before and immediately after. So that is a gap, but there's also a stop sign in the middle there. So we're not, too concerned that cars will get up to dangerous speeds in that period of time. And then the rest we were able to space pretty close to our our like ideal spacing parameters. We also avoid driveways, so we try not to place cushions within 15 feet of anyone's driveway. That way, you can back out to whatever 3-point turn you might do every day and not have to worry about hitting one of these until you're actually moving down the road. So we will keep on going, but basically just zooming in, this goes left to right, sort of shows the exact spot these cushions will be. We have some signage to warn anyone who isn't aware that speed cushions are here already, that they're coming up ahead. We definitely don't want to like surprise anyone and have them hit these cushions at a high speed, just because that's not really the goal there. We like to warn them, have them slow down ahead of time, and then just go over the cushions nice and easily. We can see moving further to the east, just have these kind of spaced, kind of roughly in that 300 to 500 foot range. Had to squeeze in right around here in the middle of the page there, between some driveways, but we're comfortable with that and think it's a good spot for that one to be. And yeah, basically just getting on over to Crest Ridge. The limits of the project, they don't go all the way to, I think it's, forget which pike it is. But Crest Ridge is sort of the boundary of the project, so we don't go further than that. And then this last sheet, this is really just kind of the bird's eye view of what these are going to look like on the road. Caldwell is not a particularly wide street, so we've got room for two. We definitely don't have room for three going across, but having two here is kind of nice, especially when you don't have sidewalks. If you were walking on the road, you wouldn't have to like walk over this. And that's kind of it for the plans. Happy to go back if anyone had questions about a specific location or just the design in general. But yeah, that's basically what we've got. And the plan right now is to upload these to the website and then ultimately vote. So I guess this flowchart is sort of the program timeline of sorts. But I wanted to make sure we didn't have any questions about the plans themselves before I move on.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure. Let's see.
Sorry about the reverb there.
Oh, no worries. Mike, I accidentally muted you, so you may have to come off mute. That was a mistake on my part.
All right. Is
Mike,
that fixable?
I think part of it might be that you were, if I'm not mistaken, you're on the phone as well as on your computer.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to log off one of your devices, either the phone or the computer.
Alternatively, if yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just on the phone and jumped off the computer. So my basic question was, I totally agree that speed on Caldwell is way too much, and there's heavy traffic. We've lived there a little over 20 years, so we've definitely seen that. The only question or thought I had is, since we are the residents there, and I think I emailed this to you, is there any other options for reducing the number of speed humps, since the residents will be the ones, I assume, will have the vast majority of the opportunity to go over these speed humps, which I completely agree and is needed to reduce speed and potential traffic, but living there, then you also create the issue of having to go over them, multiple times a day. I don't know if there's other options for that, or if this is something that can be reviewed, or how long these speed humps last in perpetuity, or those are our concerns and my family concerns. And then the other concern is to reach the 2/3 threshold. Just thinking out loud, it would seem that there were less humps, you might be able to convince more people to sign up for it and actually then reduce the speed.
I see. Yeah, to your point, so you are correct. There is the 2/3 majority. That's kind of the threshold it takes to get a project like this installed. That's all online. It isn't 2/3 of people that are on the street itself. It's simply 2/3 of those who log on and submit their vote. I'm not really sure that we'll be able to reduce the number so drastically that someone who
even any amount would be better than 11, I guess. To be very blunt, anything less is better than that amount. So if I drive over 11 humps every time I go, east to west, it's like, holy smokes. Because I live there,
yeah.
And, they're on Overhill and they're on other streets in the Green Hills areas. And I think the unintended consequence, which may be slightly intended, is that people will avoid your street then. And I know you probably can't do that intentionally by law or something, but that's what happens in reality, I assume, or there's probably studies on that when you put speed humps in, you reduce the volume of traffic and the speed.
Yeah, right. So as you alluded to, the goals of the traffic calming program are reducing speeds to a safe speed. Essentially, that's what the speed limit is, that 25-mile to 30-mile-an-hour range. And the goal is not to divert any traffic. There haven't been any studies in Nashville about traffic diversion, like where it goes if it's not on your street. Nationally, there's some data from the last few years about speed hump installations, and overall, volumes tend to decrease about 10%. I'd be a little surprised if the effect were that drastic on Caldwell, just because of the way the street grid is set up. There aren't in the neighborhood I live in, for instance, you have 5 streets that all run parallel and go the same place. I think that's kind of the environment we would be a little more worried about, the unintended consequence of traffic diversion. Here, I think that we feel pretty good that it won't be so drastic that another street will feel like an additional burden. But to your point, the goal really is to just have the existing cars travel at a speed that's appropriate to the neighborhood. And then,
yeah,
I haven't forgotten about your very first question. Can there be less? The reason we chose 11 is strictly driven by the spacing. So Caldwell is a certain length, and speed cushions are shown to be most effective when they're spaced in the range between 300 and 500 feet apart. The average of the current design is 450 to 460. So it wouldn't be it wouldn't be impossible to go down to like 10 or maybe like 9. That would start to get you out of that that range that we know to be effective. And we're not really sure that that would be the right approach. I mean, basically, what we're trying to do is produce a design that we as engineers believe will accomplish the goals most effectively. But we're very open to the possibility that most people just won't want the project in general, and that happens from time to time, and it's okay.
Sure. I mean, honestly, I think for myself, if I'm going in that area, I'm just going on Grandview or the other ones just north of Caldwell, because they all go east-west to stay off Woodmont. So I would definitely wager that traffic on those streets would pick up. And maybe it's just between Leland and Granny White, but those are the same cut-throughs. It's just Caldwell goes all the way to Franklin. So there might be some zigzagging to get through to avoid all the humps. But so again, my main concern is just since we live there, I live there, my family lives there, it's just we would be, I don't know if inconvenience is the right word, but we would have the fullest impact of all the bumps versus if there were less, the impact would be slightly less. So if there's any way to reconsider to have maybe a few less, any less would be helpful. Would be my input. So again, appreciate your considerations on that.
Understood.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. As much as I do want this, obviously I wrote in for this, but I do feel like this to me looks like every few feet, and I know it's not, but to get to my house, I would go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. It just feels like a lot, in my humble opinion.
Understood. Yeah.
I'd also like to, was it Mike? Is that your name on the phone? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I want to add to Mike's comment. I also live on Caldwell. I'm right in the middle there. So if I go left out of my house, I'm going over five of these things. If I go right, I'm going over 6 of them. So my concern, and I'm also, I also emailed about getting the data on traffic diversion. My fear is that people are going to avoid Caldwell. They're going to go down Maplehurst, which sounds like they're getting the bumps too. So they'll move to the next street or the next street. And when they do come down, let's say Leland or something like that, instead of turning onto Caldwell to get to Franklin, they maybe go down Greerland and then go down Albert or General Bate or Russellwood or Outer or Evans, the Crest Ridge. And I don't know about the rest of you, but me and my family, we all, when we go on walks, we don't walk down Caldwell Lane, we walk down all those streets. And if we're diverting traffic off of Caldwell onto those streets, I'm more concerned about pedestrians on those back streets than I am on Caldwell, because most people in the neighborhood know to avoid Caldwell Lane. So I just want this to be out on the record for people who watch the video later, that I think this is going to have very adverse consequences. I think that it is going to divert traffic, and people are going to go flying down Greerland and General Bate and Albert in these streets that really are primarily residential and aren't cut-through streets, are about to be turned into cut-through streets. So, I mean, I'm against having any of these or any amount that's going to, cause people to go around. One other question I asked in the email is, are there other options besides these? And we've been told no, these are the options, but these are the options that are available through the engineering firm, for Kimley Horn, that they offer. There was also the speed radar things, but I think there are some more obvious things that we can do to try before we jump to what I think is the extreme, which is putting in these cushions. I mean, one, the obvious thing is lower the speed limit. And I understand that people see 30 and it goes down to 25, maybe they still go 39 miles an hour, whatever the average was. But I think if you couple that with the markings on the street like Belmont has, or the white vibration stripes like Granny White has in front of that strip center, and you put those every 200 or 300 feet, along with a sign that says, speed limit 25. I mean, I don't know if that's the right option, but I'm just saying there are other options, but those aren't options that Kimley Horn is going to focus on because that's not what they do and that's not their wheelhouse. So I would rather hear another proposal that includes some kind of options that we can do before we jump to putting in cushions that could still have an effect of slowing down traffic without diverting it onto the streets where I think there are a lot more pedestrians and actually makes us more dangerous by putting these in.
Yeah, I've heard you. I have a couple things to just correct. So I work as a consultant for Kimley Horn with NDOT very closely. We are working out of a toolbox that NDOT developed as part of their traffic calming program, but before we were involved. And which engineer is doing this design has no effect on which tools are chosen. Basically, we have a method that is specific to the program, and the program that NDOT administers is really what is guiding all of the decision making here. To speak to the other options that you brought up, certainly speed limit reduction requests can happen. That is one of the things that you could submit to Hub, and it would be evaluated. We try not to wait for that as a method for traffic calming. It sort of isn't quite related as a way to basically get people who are speeding down to the intended speed limit. If we were to lower it, what we would probably see is, the road is exactly the same, right? So you would feel comfortable driving the speed you've always driven, which may be 30, it may be 35, it may be 40. So it's not quite the same like physical effectiveness that we pursue in this program. And then a note about kind of the rumble strips. Those are really more specifically intended as a way to get a driver's attention to warn about a specific hazard or road item. So if we had like an uncontrolled crosswalk, for instance, which I don't believe Caldwell does, a rumble strip would be a great thing to put like 100 feet in advance and just sort of wake up driver up to what might be in front of them. They're not typically used in series like speed cushions are because they don't really have the same physical slowing effect that cushions are designed to have. I'm not exactly sure what signage was in the example that you also referenced, so I can't like drill way down into the weeds there, but really whatever the sign is, it's not going to physically slow a car down if they would prefer to be driving faster. So that's the real reason that NDOT doesn't spend a lot of time on those first.
Gotcha. Yeah,
David, you also kind of want to be aware of noise strips in a residential area. Typically, NDOT tries to stay away from those. We've actually recently started implementing more rumble strips in some of our quick build and hub requests.
Well, the rumble strips, I understand. Maybe a better spot for those would be to warn about the stop sign that I think a lot of people in our neighborhood and on this call are worried about. Like I see as I'm walking through, people run that General Bates stop sign all the time. I don't think it's that they don't see it, but I see what you're saying. I understand that. I mean, obviously, putting a big bump in the road is going to have a bigger effect. The physical impediments are going to have an effect on people's speeds more than just the signs. I don't necessarily think that just changing the speed limit to 25 miles an hour is going to have that big of an effect. But the signage that I was talking about is like the the speed limit's actually like painted on the street. Like I think on Belmont, it says like speed limit 25. Of course, it's not going to slow people down as much as a physical impediment, but is it good enough? And, you know, my bigger fear, as I've been saying, is that physical impediments are going to redirect traffic. And then you're going to have people driving just as fast. It's going to slow them down on Caldwell, but they're still going to go 39 miles an hour now, Greenland now, or Greerland, or Albert, or General Bate, or Crest Ridge. So it slows them down on Caldwell, but if they want to go, and then on the other side of Caldwell, you know, you've got, you know, I can't, you know, Grandview and, you know, whatever, those side streets on the other side. So it slows them down on Caldwell, but does it really slow them down? And the problem with the response from the emails is we don't have that data. So I just, like, we don't know. I think that data should be taken if it's not now. But again, I think that there may be some other things that we can do that can slow people down, or just make them aware of the speed limit. But putting these in, I think is just going to cause people to go 39 miles an hour down a different street, and it's probably a street that's actually more heavily used by pedestrians.
Yeah, Phil, I actually I was working on trying to come up with as much, you know, information that I could through some of our open sources, and we were able to find, you know, speed data, but we just couldn't find volume data. So in order to perform this study, which, you know, we're trying to do a comprehensive study throughout Nashville regarding this volume differential, which is kind of what everybody's referring to. We're going to have to do formal, you know, speed studies with another consultant, and it's just gonna be more time consuming.
I'll interject a little bit just about the routing. The side streets mentioned are pretty significantly out of the way if you were just trying to get around Cushions. I think you'd have to be going very fast for it to be faster to go all the way down to Greenland or over to Maplehurst. Cushions really don't slow cars down much further than the posted speed limit. So these aren't like speed bumps that you would see in a grocery store parking lot. Those are intended to get cars down to like 5 miles an hour. Here we really are just shooting for kind of that 20 to 25 mile an hour range. And I know it can feel like you've slowed way down, but if you actually add up the time, they aren't such a significant obstacle that we would expect a lot of people speeding to go way out of their way to avoid. Not going to say nobody would, you know, people do all kinds of things, but in general, that's not what we experience, and it's not what the data that we have shows. I see Councilmember Kripke has raised his hand.
If I could just comment on that real quick, if you don't mind,
Sure.
Jeff. I think that we're underestimating how much people hate these things, and it's not that, like, if it takes them an extra 2 minutes to go around these things, I think they'll do it. Now, that's my opinion, and you've expressed yours, and I think it'll be up to the people who vote to have their own opinion. But it's not, you know, like I said, it's the annoyance of these things that people are going to avoid, not that it slows them down. You know, if it takes an extra, again, minute or two, they're going to go around these things to avoid just having to drive, especially 11. I mean, going back to Mike's point and Jordan's point, I mean, 11 is like, people are going to go around that, even if it costs them, I mean, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, I don't know. But I do think people are going to avoid them.
Understood. Councilmember?
Yeah, so two things that I wanted to add into the discourse on this. The first one being sort of just anecdotally is that on Lombardi Avenue here in the district is that we've had these speed cushions on, and Lombardi is a cut through for folks to try and avoid Woodmont Boulevard whenever they're coming off of 440 straight from Hillsborough Pike. And so there on at least on Lombardi, it has had a significant influence on slowing some people down on the specific stretch where there are those two speed cushions. But something that I think might be helpful for folks to see is if there's been any quantitative data that's been collected with regards to the speed cushions that have been added on Gale Lane. That's just north of the district, just outside of the district, but those speed cushions have been added relatively recently. I'm springing this on you all, so you might not have information or data readily available on that. But I think that if there is that data available, if we can disseminate it to folks along Caldwell Lane and who have these concerns to see sort of what that effect has looked like across this area of the county, I think that would be very helpful.
It sounds like they have the data on the speed. Like, I don't think anybody's questioning that it'll slow people down. The question is like those, like all the streets you just named, and then I don't know, I can't remember the name of the street, but if you go down like Shackelford, and there was like a little street you could kind of turn on, and you go around the corner, and it allows you to go to like the shorter traffic light there on Richard Jones.
Yeah.
They put those bumps on there. I avoid all those streets now. And maybe it cost me 30 seconds. That's kind of my point. I don't care that it costs me 30 seconds. Now, I don't drive fast, so I don't think I'm part of the people who, especially through residential neighborhoods, but I still use them if I knew that I could shave a couple of seconds or minutes off of a drive. So again, the data that I think I'm asking for is how it affects traffic patterns and where those cars divert to, because I'm certainly one of those people who avoids these things like the plague. And now I can't because I live on Caldwell, and I'm going to have to drive over 11 of these things. I mean, more than that if I'm leaving my house more than once a day. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying, Phil. I was just asking to see like if they had any quantitative data, not just about speed, but about actual traffic volume. If there is any data as it relates to Gale Lane or as it relates to Lombardi, being able to share that so that we can sort of have comparison.
Yeah, I would love that data, but I think that's what I asked for, and they mentioned they just don't have it.
Yeah, that's correct. Darren, at any point, if you want to elaborate, feel free. But to my understanding, Nashville has not done a study that puts traffic volume counters in the surrounding area after a traffic calming project to see if the volume went up. I think that they're interested in collecting that, but that is a fairly large undertaking, especially because it is kind of hard to predict how somebody who is particularly motivated not to drive over a speed cushion, which way they might go. In any case, I think it's pretty safe to say we're not going to have a study to that degree that will satisfy that concern before it's time to vote on a design. So we might want to sort of discuss the path forward for Caldwell. Now, I will say, like I alluded to earlier, this is the design that really holds hard to 300 to 500 foot spacing. I'm not hearing a lot of passion among the group that anyone is really intent on holding that. So I have taken a pretty in-depth look at this design and opportunities that we could reduce the number of speed cushions. And those opportunities essentially boil down to combining the two at this end and at this end. That gets you down to 9. Any fewer than that just leaves gaps that are long enough that we would expect people to speed up probably faster than they would have been going anyway. And that's what we really do want to avoid. So I guess if we don't need to look further at the design, we can kind of talk about this ballot process and what that might look like and the plans that will be able to be reviewed online. Does that work for everyone, kind of moving on to that section and discussing sort of whatever is needed?
Sounds good to me. Thank you.
Of course. But yeah, I guess just to gauge the group, like if this design goes down to 9 cushions, are the people who are excited about it feeling okay? Are the people who are not excited about it feeling different? Just sort of wanted to gauge reactions.
I could say for me, the difference between 9 and 11 isn't gonna change my opinion.
Understood. Okay, well, that sounds good. Basically, this timeline that we're looking at here is the current iteration of how NDOT does these projects. We are this big red circle, so this is meeting number 2, as we kind of reviewed. That leaves the online ballot as the next step. So basically, what we'll do is publish the design on NDOT's website, send everyone a similar postcard to the one that we got, to attend this meeting. That'll have a unique ballot code on it. Kind of looks like this. You can see the unique ID code here. And basically, that's what will, have your vote be unique. There's a few fine print items. So basically, voting is open for 6 weeks. We'll have the date that voting closes on the card, so you know what the deadline is to get your vote in. It's either yes or no. There's no like maybe or if this then that. It's just yay or nay. And then, like we've discussed already, 66% yes of those who respond is the threshold which will make the project successful. This is the ballot zone. So essentially the rules about who votes is anyone who owns a parcel of land that is abutting the affected street. So if you're on a corner and your address is on Leland, you still are afforded the option to vote. That gets a little complicated with, like buildings that are their own parcel. So we basically just said if any parcel within a parcel of land is abutting, then that is the vote. So like some of these lots, as you can see, are used to be one big lot. Now it's like 2 houses that kind of share that common space. We've accounted for all that, and everyone will get mail to vote. It is like as an individual person. So if you own 10 properties on Caldwell, you'll get the 1 vote. Similarly, if you have 10 people living in one house, it's 1 vote per per parcel there. Vacant properties are eligible. That's like, if you're a field, we're not going to try to send you mail and get a vote out of you. And then businesses that are like operating. So if Granny White Pike had like a laundromat or something on that corner, we really want the residents to be deciding. But I don't think that any like true businesses are on this list. If your home is owned by like an LLC or something, that's still fine. We don't call you like a business. We're really just looking to isolate the those who live on the street that we're designing a project for. And that's all I've got. I've got all kinds of time for questions, more discussion. If there's anything else the group wants to talk about, we can stay here and just sort of make sure that we leave the meeting feeling like it was productive and answered all of our questions.
David, I do just want to thank you quickly for putting all this stuff together. And just as an added note to your prior question, like if this did get approved, like if it gets voted yes, I'd even rather see the 11 than 9. Like if we're going to do it, let's do it the way you've designed it. You've put a lot of work into it, and I would trust your judgment on that. So just the closing point on the 9 versus 11. But thanks for putting this together.
Of course, really appreciate that. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate when folks show up to these and offer whatever opinions they have. We had some really good discussion tonight. And yeah, just thank you for being engaged. And it's really, it's nice to see that you all care about, your community. Well, if no one else has anything, we'll wrap up. But yeah, again, thanks everyone for a good meeting, and be on the lookout in the next few weeks for some mail regarding the voting.
I'm so sorry. I do have a last minute question, if
Oh,
that's okay.
please.
My
Yeah,
husband
absolutely.
just asked a question that was good, and you may have said this, and I just didn't hear it. But are these permanent, or does this last until a certain point where we feel like it's under control and then they're removed, or what is the longevity of these?
They are intended to be permanent installations. So they're not like a temporary measure that we put out and then remove after a certain period of time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Well, we'll sign off. But again, thanks everyone, and have a great night.